who volunteers with Tyne Sound News, and this is what they had to say.
Okay, and now we're ready to welcome our next guest, Robin Bosanquet. Robin, you have worked with Tyne Sound. Tell us what Tyne Sound is.
Well, it's really a talking newspaper. There are, I believe there are lots of different talking newspapers around the country, but this is the one for the North East. And it's a small setup, and it consists of volunteer editors who cull pieces of news from the newspaper, the Chronicle and the Journal. It's all locally based news. I'm told that it's not allowed to dwell on criminalities such as murders and bad news, so it tends to be fairly positive. And I think we're also not allowed to mention football. But otherwise, it's anything which might be of relevance to our listeners. And we go along, we're a bunch of 4 teams, we go along on Sunday mornings, we make a recording, we put that all onto tapes, or now much more onto CDs, and dispatch them so they're all in the post by the first thing on Monday morning, and hopefully should reach our listeners by Tuesday.
And who are your listeners? What's your target audience?
Well, the target audience is really people who are have visual problems, unable to read, and most of them are also unable to use a computer. Otherwise, they could listen to the news online.
Okay. And how many of those? About how many is it?
The number, sadly, is dwindling. When I first started, I think we used to send out about 700 each Sunday. But the numbers are gradually going down, for good reasons as well as bad. I mean, unfortunately, we're losing some of our older listeners, and the younger ones are less interested because they're pretty computer savvy, and so they've got computer programs which will talk to them. And also, it's a credit to the ophthalmologists that there are fewer people who are in a situation where they can't read for themselves because of the treatment they're getting.
Great, good. How did you become involved in it, and how long have you been involved?
I joined, I think it was 2008. I had retired. I had some time on my hands. My daughter had a friend, Charlie Charlton, who worked for Radio Newcastle, and her father, Bill Charlton, who you may know, he was doing it at the time. So Emily, my daughter, said, well, why didn't you go along with Bill Charlton? And I did. And I thought the volunteers were extremely friendly and social and interesting bunch of people. I enjoyed reading. And also I think it suited me because in my previous life I worked as an eye specialist at the RVI. And so actually I knew by name a lot of the people we were sending the tapes out to, and I could imagine them listening to what I was reading to them.
Right. I'm interested in that business that you were asked, that how many volunteers, I wonder, volunteer of their own volition, and how many are brought in by friends? How many are...
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah. I suspect that a lot of them are actually out-of-work amateur actors. From the conversation that goes on over coffee, I think a lot of them are involved with amateur dramatics. And of course they make excellent readers too.
Right,
which
okay.
is good.
You mentioned that business of the sociability of it, and how important is that in any volunteering activity, do you think?
Oh, enormously. I mean, you give up your time and you arrange your working schedule around your volunteering commitments, and so it wasn't for the fact that you enjoyed it when you got there. I would have dropped out long ago, but it's a very sociable morning, and at the end you leave, you feel you've done something worthwhile, and you've enjoyed the company, and also you picked up quite a bit of news along the way.
Yes, okay. We're going to come to that point at which I'm going to ask you to choose a piece of music. What have you chosen for us?
Well, this was hard, but I thought the music I really like is a tune called The Sunny Side of the Street, which is very appropriate on this February morning, played by Johnny Hodges.
Right.
he played with Duke Ellington for a long time, and he has an absolutely instantly recognisable style where he swoops from one note to another. And I remember friends telling me about when he played in Newcastle many years ago at the City Hall. He's a very laconic sort of guy, and he plays this most romantic stuff, but I believe he's a hard-bitten, heavy-drinking sort of chap.
Yeah. That goes with the territory.
Yeah,
right,
yes.
let's have that piece of music. Well, that was a very interesting choice of music, and we're here with Robin Bosanquet of Time Sound. Robin, not merely did you, in your introduction, you clearly showed a knowledge of jazz. Is this a part of your life as well?
Oh, very much so. I've always loved jazz. I love music actually in all its forms, classical and folk music, and but particularly jazz. I play the saxophone. Unfortunately, I don't play it very well, and I'm not good at jazz. I really just can't make it up on the hoof, which is what you have to do. But I love listening to it.
Yeah, and the other part of your music also involves sort of volunteering work as well.
Well, I'm connected with the Globe, which is a pub on Railway Street, just off Scotswood Road. I think it's the only surviving pub. There were 40 at one time along that road. It's a rather fine building, which you'll see on the corner if you're driving around there. And it actually has 2 rooms, one upstairs and one downstairs. And it's devoted to music. It's run as a cooperative, and I was one of the sort of the founder members, and I go and volunteer, not to play, but to work in the bar and take the tickets on the door.
But I'd like to talk about another aspect of your volunteering work, which was your work in North India, which was related to your own professional capacity. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I think that was shortly before I retired. I loved travelling, and one of the reasons I went into eyes was I thought this would be a passport to a lifetime of travel working abroad. But the family scotched that idea. So by the end of my career, the family were off our hands, and I started working part-time and taking long holidays when I would go and work as a volunteer with an organisation called, what's the name of it now?
Second Sight.
Second Sight, thank you very much, Second Sight, which is a very good, focused organisation which concentrates on dealing with blindness in the rural parts of India. India's got plenty of its own doctors, but they don't want to go to the out-of-the-way places for obvious reasons. So we would go out and spend 3 weeks really just doing loads and loads of cataract operations and embedding yourself in the Indian way of life, which personally I love India.
Right. How often did you go?
In all, it was about 7 times in all. To Rajasthan, Orissa, and Bihar, which is the poorest of all the Indian states.
Right. And how long would you stay for on these occasions?
Well, about 3 weeks, and it was a hard grind. You just start operating early in the morning and go on until about 6 at night, with a break for lunch, and working through what I thought were huge numbers, but actually in Indian terms were relatively small.
Except I have read the number of 300,000 were done in all during that period.
Oh yes. And they were very challenging, because I mean they were very advanced cataract, and they sometimes be quite difficult to do, especially with the equipment which you had. So there were I can tell you, there were some pretty worrying moments.
Right. So how did you find the equipment when you were there?
Well, basic.
Yeah.
Basic, but just about adequate.
Right.
The worst thing was that the electricity supply was so unpredictable,
right.
And you'd be in the middle of an operation, the power would suddenly go off, and you were plunged into darkness. You can imagine the sort of panic. And they always had generators, but there were perhaps quite a few seconds before the generator cut in, and that sort of thing happened several times a day.
Right. And but you managed to also sort of you've trained people there who have taken over from you.
Yes, trained the local people. This particular charity, they don't use people from England anymore because Lucy, who runs it, has managed to persuade Indian doctors, mainly from the south of India, to do it, and they're actually much more proficient than I ever was. I mean, they will work through literally 100 people a day, and the operations are beautifully done. I can't speak highly enough of them.
Robin, it's been fantastically interesting talking to you about this. We could obviously go on talking about your volunteer activities quite a lot longer, but thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you.